Grab a Bible. Dylan, will you get the light for us with Kyler or whoever is back there? Thank you. So we are continuing our series, Jesus is Coming. And I don't know about anybody else, but I've enjoyed this series. It's really, for myself, it has really challenged me to really focus on how I'm living, what I'm doing day by day. Am I devoting myself to holiness, to being holy? So I want to do something just real quick tonight to kind of, I'll be honest with you, I've had a crazy week. I can tell you about it later. I've had a crazy week. So to kind of refocus, get us in the mindset of where we're going, how many of you enjoyed, we're now into April. Seems crazy that we're already in the 4th month of the year, right? So we're in April. And so how many of you enjoyed March? What we did in March, beginning of this series. What for you was something that you've taken away from the first part of this series? Whether it was in one of the messages, whether it was last week, and something we talked about, what's something you took away from? What you got? Coming back. Dylan. You gotta be ready? Okay. Tim?
Just because you accept Jesus into your heart doesn't mean that in that very moment, that very second, you're going to get up into heaven.
That's true. It's true. Anybody else? What you got?
When you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, it'll never leave you, but you can slowly drift away.
Anybody else? Anything stuck out to you?
And we need to be prepared.
You in prayer? Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Anybody good? So, the thing that stuck out to me, and I didn't actually say this to the girls because it came to me last week when we were actually in discussion, and it was talking about God being our first love, that we had lost our first love. And so many times we get wrapped up in the busyness of life. How many of you have a busy schedule? Right? Sometimes you're just go. And sometimes, I'm going to say this to Tim and Sarah, and Skylar and Carson, y'all are dating. We're old married.
We're not dating.
We're engaged now.
Yeah.
You're not married.
I put a ring on it.
You're not married.
Darn right I.
You're not married. We're married, so we've done this a good 18 years coming this year. So, it's crazy. Not married 18 years, just been dating 18 years. Been together 18 years. 15 years married in April. This month, 14. 14. Next year's 15. I'm planning things in my head, so I'm already a year ahead of time. So, but have you ever been together, you dating couples, been doing stuff together all day, and then felt like you had no time together, even though you were together the whole time? I have had those moments where we're just so busy, we're doing stuff. There's not really, even though they're right there, they're not really there. And sometimes we get in that same mindset with God. We're doing so many things. We're so active at the church. We're doing so many things. I'm singing here. I'm doing this. You know that we're doing stuff that we're not actually having a relationship with God. We're just getting busy for God. And oftentimes we think when we're getting busy for God that we're having a relationship with Him. But that's what He was telling the church at Ephesus. He's like, you're doing all these things. And they're great things. They're good things. but you've lost sight of me. And the thing that God wants most is us. It's not our service. It's not what we bring to the table. It's not our witness. It's not our testimony. What he wants most is you. He wants time with you, quality with you. All those other things are supposed to be an overflow of that relationship where he just is with you. And that's the most important thing. And that's what I don't want us to lose sight of what it means to lose our first love. That we get caught up in everything else, even if they're good. It still can't replace that time with him. So tonight, we're going on to church number 2. The church at Smyrna. And so in Revelation chapter 2, starting with verse 8, we're going to read through it all, and then we're going to go back and break it down. It's only a few chapters. And it says, "To the angel of the church at Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. I know your tribulation, your poverty, but you are rich. And the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death." All right, so he's writing to the church at Smyrna. And this is very important. So there's 7 churches that we're going to talk about. There are only 2 churches, and this is one of them, that God does not say the words or phrases, "this one thing I have against you." All right? So God is talking to them. He has nothing bad to say. In the fact that God himself doesn't have something against them. But the message that God is giving them is sometimes hard. Even though God doesn't have something against us, doesn't mean what we're going through is going to be easy. And so we have the church at Smyrna. I'm going to give you a little bit of history while we go through this. So it says, "And to the angel of the church at Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last who died and came to life." So we know this is Jesus. Jesus is sending this letter. He's giving it to John to send to them. And I asked our leadership, and I actually asked Pastor Brian this the other day. And this is something that you can do for yourself. If you look at yourself, our church, however you want to do it, right? And you said, if Jesus was writing a letter to me, like he is here to the churches, right? He's establishing himself as who he is. I am he, the first, the last. I was dead, now I'm alive. I'm the only one, right? And then he writes this letter, and this is what he's saying, church. What would he write to you? What would he say to us? I'll be honest with you. I prayed this prayer, and I thought about this, and within like 2 minutes, I was repenting of what I felt convicted by God, what God was telling me. Like, I was like, Lord, I am so sorry. I was like, it was not what he wrote to the church at Smyrna. Like, I was repenting. I was like, you know what? I've been foolish. I've been sinful. But here in the church, he's writing and he's establishing who he is. The fact that he is the only one to write this letter. So Smyrna is a little town in Asia. It's one of the 7 churches. And it was a very large port city. It was a metropolis of that time. There were hundreds and thousands of people that lived here. The culture was very diverse. There were people coming in and trading. Okay? And so Smyrna was known for one very expensive and important export that they had. And it's where their name comes from. Smyrna actually had controlling rights of myrrh. How many of you know in the Bible, Jesus is born, the wise men come, what do they bring him? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Alright? Myrrh was used all over in burial situations and stuff. And so myrrh was where the name Smyrna actually came from. It's what they were known for. They had the legal rights. They were the ultimate distributor of this. But what's interesting, myrrh, the fragrance that we get, that's used in burials, we all know it and people realize it as a fragrance, actually comes from a plant of the same name. But in order to get the myrrh, the fragrance out of it, you actually have to take this plant and it has to be bruised, it has to be crushed, and it has to be tortured to get the fragrance out of it. So now this church is in Smyrna, and they're the persecuted church. They're the church that's going to be beaten. They're the church that's going to be broken. They're the church that's going to be in tribulation. And it's fitting that they're in Smyrna, where myrrh comes from. And so in verse 9 he says, I know your tribulation. And we're going to get into some of this here in just a little bit. So we're going to skip over the tribulation, and we're going to come back to that, because he talks about it again. And he says, I know your poverty, but you are rich. The word poverty has so much more meaning. Oftentimes we hear about in the Bible the word poor, right? And we think about people that are poor, they're lacking funds, or they have very little. But in this context, when he's talking to the church of Smyrna, he says, you are poor, and it really, literally means they have nothing. They are the lowest in society in this town. They are subjected and aren't able to go into certain places. They aren't allowed to go places. They aren't allowed to do things. They aren't even allowed to have certain jobs. People won't hire them. They won't give them opportunities because they are a Christian. So they had nothing. But he says, but you are rich. Even though they were poor physically, they were still rich spiritually. And so it lines up, if you go to Matthew, we're going to flip real quick to Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Verse 19 says, do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will also be. These people had no treasures. They had nothing. They were the lowest of low. But Jesus is telling them, I see your poverty. I see where you're at. I see the situation that you're in. But I want you to know that you are rich. We see the opposite with Jesus and the disciples when they're fighting who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. These people knew that they were at the lowest. But they had everything. And it says, the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. The word slander there is actually blasphemy. So they're not just talking about these Christians. They're not just saying bad things about them. And there was a large population of Jews in Smyrna at this time. There was a large population. They had came over. They had resettled. They had moved over from away from Jerusalem to different towns and stuff. And in a lot of these port cities, they had clusters of Jews and synagogues and stuff where Jews would settle. And so there's a large population of them, especially compared to the small Christian church. And so oftentimes when you have a small group of people that go against a larger group of people, what happens? You have that mob mentality where they go after them in a group form. And so they're not just talking about them, saying, oh, Skylar, she's a Christian, blah, 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 blah. But they're actually blaspheming them. And so while they're talking about them, they're actually talking bad about God, saying things about their God. And they're going against who they were and who they were established as. In this, it talks about that they would actually go, if you look at church history and stuff, it says these Jews would actually go and favor on the sides of the Romans, those that were in rule at the time. They would go to them and seek their help. And that was against what God had wanted them to do. They were absorbing into society and going against their own religion, their own rules, to blaspheme and hurt these Christians. They were like Paul before he was converted on the road to Damascus. We all know Paul hated Christians. He was killing them. He wanted to throw them in jail. And then God came and changed them. In the same way, these people were like Paul, but they never received Christ. They never had that conversion. What they were doing was going against what their own faith told them. And so they were a synagogue of Satan. They were actually doing the work that Satan wanted to destroy the church. And then he goes and says, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. And for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. So, this letter is wrote by John around 90 to 96 AD. And there was already persecution and things going on. We know this from the Bible. We know this from church history. There was things already going on. But things from this point on got worse. So it says, for 10 days. 10 days, this phrase in the Greek is actually just a reference that meant for a short time. It wasn't a literal 10 days necessarily, but for a short time they were going to have tribulation. It says some of you will be thrown into jail, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful until death. Well, in 155, there was a man named Polycarp. Okay, he was the bishop of Smyrna. He was the leader of the church. He would have been one of the ones that received this letter, read it to the people, encouraged the church, saying, hey, you know what? I know what we're going through. I know how hard it is. I know that we're poor, but God says we're rich. We just got to keep going. And he would have been encouraging them and walking faithfully among them. Well, in 155 AD, he has a dream one night. He has a dream, and in his dream, his pillow catches fire around him. And it's burning. And so he wakes up, he goes to his companions, and he tells them, he's like, hey, I had this dream. I'm going to be burned alive. 3 days later, he's arrested. And the story of how this man's arrest went was crazy. He's arrested. 2 men come to him. Come to his house to take him. He doesn't struggle. He's an old man at this time. He's at least 86. He may be older at that time. He's an old man. He answers the door. He doesn't put up a fight or anything. He invites the men that are telling him, hey, you need to come with us. We're taking you before the leaders. He invites them into his house, has a meal prepared for them, and he's like, hey, can I go and pray for 2 hours? And so they ate the meal, they let him go, and he prayed. And the men felt guilty. The story goes that the men felt guilty about taking him. But he went with them, and then he goes before the leader, the proconsul, and the man sees him, the leader sees him, has pity on him, and basically tells Polycarp, he's like, deny Christ, give allegiance to Caesar, and I will let you go. Just do it. And he looks at him, and his response is, these 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I deny him now? And in a rage, they grab Polycarp, and they take him up on Mount Pagus in Smyrna. They tie him to a pole, put wood around him, and they light him on fire and burn him at the stake. Now, don't know if it's true. Legend has it that a large gust of wind came at that time, and while he was on the stake, the flames flew out behind him. So he's standing there, but he's not hurt by the flames. So they drug him off the stake, and then they stabbed him to death. And Polycarp was killed. But in this letter that he would have received, it says, be faithful unto death. And that was a start of tribulation that would happen all the way up until Constantine became emperor. There's 2 other accounts where in one account they took 1,500 Christians up on the mountain at one time and slaughtered all of them at one time. And then on another account they took another 800 Christians up on the mountain and slaughtered them all at one time. So this church had tribulation. When they were reading these words until death, they understood that death was coming. Especially after what had happened to their bishop, their leader, Polycarp. But then it goes on and says, I will give you the crown of life. So Smyrna was considered a crown city. Okay, it was one of the best cities of the time. Their Acropolis, which is like a cathedral, citadel, or whatever that's up on the hill, was actually made in the shape of a crown. So when you came into the city, you saw this building, this monument up on top of the hill, and it looked like a crown. Their money even had crowns on it. It was the symbol for their city. So we've got to remember things when we're reading the Bible, this wasn't written to us. It was written for us. So when he's telling them you will receive a crown of life, this was what their life was. They had their own Colosseum where they would have battles, and the champions would receive a victor's crown. And so there's people that are walking around this town, whether they're royalty, whether they're victors, and they see crowns all around them. It's on the money. It's in the monuments. It's on people's heads. But as Christians, they would have never had an opportunity to receive a crown in the life that they were living. And he says, I will give you the crown of life. This word crown in this instance does not mean a crown worn by royalty, but means a victor's crown. He says, if you wait, if you remain, even until death, I will give you the victor's crown. I will give you the crown of life. Something you've seen your whole lifetime, but haven't received. But what I give you is so much better than anything that you can get. The Christians in Smyrna, they were burned at the stake. They were slaughtered. They were beheaded. They were thrown into the Colosseum, given to wild beasts. For over 200 years' time, this church was persecuted. But the church continued on. He said, I will give you the crown of life. And they would have understood what that meant. That they were in a battle. What they were going to face was going to be hard. But there was going to be a future glory for them. And he says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. After Jesus comes back, in this life, you either die or you're taken up. Okay? After that, there's the final judgment at the very end. And that final judgment tells the world. That's when it says, the Bible says, every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess. When everybody's going to be separated. Those that knew him, those that accepted him, those that followed him, those that had been martyred for him, and those that hadn't. And the second death is God's final judgment when he sends everyone away that never knew him into the lake of fire. He says, he who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. So we know this was not written to us. So what is God telling us today? What stands out to me is be faithful unto death. Okay? I'm going to say, and I could be completely wrong to this, where we're at, where we live, where we're at in society, the majority of us will not die because we're a martyr. That's just the society that we live in, okay? That could change very quickly. I want you to know that. Those things can change very quickly. But that does not mean we don't need to be faithful until death. They recognized that this faithfulness until death meant that, hey, I'm going to have to give my life. For us, today, it does not mean that, hey, I'm going to have to give my life in the fact that I'm going to have to give it up and die. But it does mean that, hey, I've got to give my life sacrificially until I die. It doesn't matter whether we're at the sword, at the stake, thrown in prison, or we're out living our lives like we are every single day. We still have to remain faithful until death. Whenever that comes, however that is. If God lets you live to a ripe old age of 110, you need to be faithful until death. If he takes us home tomorrow, we need to be faithful until he comes. How we die doesn't matter. How we live until we die is what matters. We may face tribulation. We may even face poverty at some point in time. People are going to talk bad about us. Especially if we're living right. The reason the world has a problem with true Christians is because we're living exactly opposite of them. If the world is not having a problem with us, is not trying to slander us, not trying to stop us, then we're probably a little bit too close to them. They were the exact opposite of everyone they were around. They were hated for it. They were slandered for it. And until death, they were killed for it. For us, we still can receive a crown of life. We can still receive a victor's crown. We have to be faithful until death. And if we do that, we know that when we stand before God, when we're judged, He's going to say, "Enter, well done, good and faithful servant." He's not going to tell us, "Depart from me." We're not going to be harmed from the second death. What is interesting, it's a whole lot easier sometimes to hear something hard and correct your ways than to hear something good and face what's coming. Does that make sense? The church at Ephesus, God had something against them. He's like, "You've lost your faith at first love." Their action was to repent and come back to their first love. Sometimes that's easier than God saying, "You're going to die. Be ready for it." Are you ready until death? It takes so much to have the mindset of, "Lord, whatever comes, I'm going to die." To be like Polycarp, have the boldness, knowing in an instance he's going to die, but saying, "Knowing these 86 years I've served him, he's never done me wrong. How can I deny him now? How can I blaspheme him now?" But that's where God wants us to be. And having that kind of heart is what it would take for God not to have anything against you. He didn't have anything against this church. But look what they had to go through to have right standing before God, to continue in their faith. Young people, I love you. And I'm not going to feed you crap. Following Jesus is hard. Living a holy life is hard. It's not easy. Jesus did not call us to easy. He didn't call us to comfort. He called us to take up our cross and follow Him, even if that meant to death. Are we willing to do that? Are we willing to be like the church at Smyrna, where we're bruised, we're crushed, but what comes out is a sweet fragrance unto God? I've been challenged by this church, by Smyrna, that I want to be willing to face anything God has for me. His will be done. If that means I'm going to the stake, Lord, let me go. But that's a hard place to be. And to be there, we have to be completely devoted to Him. And I hope all of us are there, or we're getting there. If you're not there today, that's okay. That is okay. But we want to get closer to Him. So tonight, we're going to finish with worship and realizing that we have a God who loves us, who cares for us, and that He died for our sins that we may have a relationship with Him. And He's asking for the same thing from us. Would we be faithful unto death, just as He was faithful unto death? Let's stand and pray.